Giro for Umbra Games here. I'm pretty sure I own a copy of Limbo on at least 4 systems, and while waiting on an Xbox One update one evening, I decided to fire it up on my free PlayStation Plus copy on PlayStation 4. I'll be honest, while I'm all for the indie game movement, I don't spend a whole lot of time playing some of the smaller indie titles like this. A lot of the reasons because most of the time they end up being fairly shallow puzzle platformer type games with the same basic gameplay. Granted, most only require an hour or two time investment, but I often find myself wanting to devote that precious time to a bigger game. But every once in a while one will grab my attention, and there was Limbo sitting on my dashboard. As hinted, Limbo is a puzzle platformer, and as you can see, a 2D side-scroller. The controls are very simple, limited to run, jump, and grab. I do think it's a slightly bad design choice to have your character keep jumping when you hold down the jump button. It's instinct from our innate platforming skills to hold down the button to get that longer jump. Instantly taken off again when hitting the ground caused more than a few deaths. Limbo's puzzles involve timing your jumps and movement, as well as pulling levers and pushing boxes. There are a few different movement hindrance mechanics that appear throughout the journey as well, like being tied up or only being able to go one direction, to add some additional layers of complexity. There are no tutorials to guide you or hint at what things in your environment do or will do, which is actually a pretty refreshing change. It really adds to the feeling of being lost in this world. Also, as you can see, the game is played in black and white with a strong use of shadow and light contrast. I'm good with the minimalist take and atmosphere. As an attempted indie developer, I understand the hardships of trying to make high-quality art assets. One result of the constant black and white, though, is the inability to quickly recognize dangers in the path. But, since there are no lives and a checkpoint after what felt like pretty much every single screen and nearly instant load time, the resultant trial and error method to make it through is actually pretty enjoyable. I like to think I'm a pretty artsy, sensitive guy most of the time, but I grow tired of these pretentious developers and writings of some of these games saying their open-ended stories are too complex for us to understand and no one gets it. I read that Art Jensen, the game director, was aiming to make the game open to interpretation like some popular films, and that in reading the forums, no one had quite nailed the theme he was going for. The name of the game is Limbo, a small spoiler. The game is cyclical, and when you finish the game, you're back to where you started, which, by the way, there's not really any replay value unless you want to try and find a few hidden coins, but you go through forests and into a city, and at a couple points you have visions of a girl, and there's a white butterfly that stays out of your reach and moves to the right occasionally, but let's be honest. We're moving boxes. We're pulling levers. Trying to stitch in some deeper story about overcoming guilt or being trapped in a religious limbo just tries to fit something that just really isn't there. It's odd that most of the human characters you see in the game are children. There's a lot of dead bodies and piles are floating in water, and at one point you have to crush a corpse to proceed, and further crushing live children to get past them. Okay, I've got it. Maybe Jensen grew up in a forest as a kid. When he moved to the city, he got bullied and he always felt alone. There was some girl at school that had a white butterfly t-shirt she would wear, and he was too scared to ask her to be his girlfriend. Every time he thought about trying, kids made fun of him and bullied him more, so he was stuck in an endless loop of pain and suffering. Oh, and he's afraid of spiders. There. Story solved. The pacing in Limbo feels a little strange, as what I would consider to be the only real enemy of the game comes fairly early, delivers a couple moments of pretty high tension, and then the time after that is spent in some lonely empty spaces pushing boxes around. When the game was over, it was pretty unexpected because the finishing puzzle was no different than a lot of the ones along the way. Or wait, maybe that's the point. I don't know. Anyway, I know I was a little negative, but overall I enjoyed the couple of hours I spent with Limbo. A lot of the puzzles were pretty clever, and there was a sense of satisfaction in figuring them out. Most console services have offered this as a free game at some point, so if you see it at a reasonable price, or, free, I would recommend playing through it if you enjoy the puzzle-solving genre. I'm not one to discredit a game by its length. Limbo felt exactly the length that it needed to be. Rated by my puzzle platformer criteria, I give it a 62 out of 100. This is Giro for Umbra Games. Thanks for watching.